The noon heat in Pueblo pressed down like a hand. Wind scraped grit across the depot steps and rattled the tin signs. Coal smoke clung to the tongue. Eli Mercer pinned a handbill to the board with a tack he bit from his teeth. The paper a careful sketch of a young woman with steady eyes. Claire Mercer. Missing. Reward. Train steam hissed behind him. Boots thudded past. A cattle buyer shouted for a porter. No one looked at the old soldier with the pale eyes and the tremor he held in his wrist by force of will. Laughter rolled from the stock pens. Not the usual kind. Mean, bright laughter that made the hair rise on the arms. Eli turned his hat brim down and followed the sound past wagons and stacked ties to the shaded alley by the pens. A flatbed stood there with a crowd gathered and a man on it in a black hat, the brim oiled the smile loose. Cole Maddox of La Junta. Everyone in 3 counties knew the way he smiled. At his feet, a woman knelt with her wrists braided raw by rope. Her dress had been respectable once. Now it hung in strips. Dust clung in salt lines where sweat had dried. Educated Maddox called, turning a little so the crowd could see the curve of her cheek. Reads, writes, handy with fevers, eats more than she's worth. Laughter again sharper this time. Eli moved in until he was at the cutboard they were using as a table. He took a silver dollar from his vest and set it down so the ring of it cut through the noise. The coin was worn smooth. It had no shine, left only weight. "Write your name," Eli said. Maddox cocked his head. "You buying or preaching, old man?" "I am buying." Eli tapped the folded paper at Maddox's elbow. "Bill of sale, your hand, your name, so no one forgets." The crowd leaned in to hear. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes found Eli, then slid away as if the sight of any gaze burned. Maddox held the coin to the light and grinned. $1, damaged goods. He spat into the dust. "Fine." He signed. Eli watched the letters lay down in black ink. C. Maddox, ink beads drying fast in the heat. Eli folded the paper, put it in his breast pocket, and looked at the rope on the woman's wrists. "Get down," he said. "You have work." She stood on numb feet and swayed a little. No one reached for her. They were here to be entertained, not to help. Eli stepped back and opened the way with a shoulder. The wind found them again and pushed grit against their ankles. They walked east along the river road until the depot noise thinned and the smell of coal gave way to alfalfa and mud. At the Arkansas, the banks were low and slick. Water slid past brown and quick where it cut around willow roots. "Hold still," Eli said. He cut the rope. The hemp peeled back from her skin, flesh lifted in ridges where the fibers had chewed into it. She held her wrists in the river. The cold made her hiss. Blood lightened in the water and unwound in loops. "You have a name," Eli said. She watched the current catch the broken rope and carry it away. Nora Vale. "I am Eli." He put the knife back in its leather. His hands were steady now that they were on work, he understood. "Can you walk?" She nodded. "If I fall, leave me. I am tired of being dragged." "Drink," he said, "then walk." They found shade under cottonwoods. Cicadas drilled the heat. Eli rationed the canteen without looking at her. The habit of thrift had lived in his bones since Shiloh. He watched her hands instead. She cupped water without splashing, checked the lip for chips by touch. A nurse's hands precise even when wrecked. "You were trained," he said. Her mouth pulled tight. "War taught me. The rest I learned in a place I do not name." "Who held you?" Wind lifted the hair at her temple and pressed it back to the skin. She did not answer. He did not ask again. He was learning her kind of caution. They made a cold camp when the sun burned low and the light went red against the river. Eli lit a small fire with dry willow twigs and boiled coffee in a blackened tin. The smell was bitter and clean. He tore beef and passed it without looking up. He could feel when eyes were on him. This woman's gaze came and went like the wind. He let it. "Why," she said when the first cup had warmed her hands. Eli scraped the pot and set it back on the coals. A little flame ran around the edge and fell into itself. "I need a nurse," he said. Nora smiled without humor. "You want to hire me, at $1. Good wage." "I bought the paper, not you," Eli said. "There is a difference." Her laugh was one breath long and not kind. A paper never stopped a man who wanted a thing. He let that stand. He took the folded bill from his pocket and smoothed it on his knee where the light reached. Maddox's name lay there in clean strokes. "I want this," he said, "and what you know about men who use doctors' words to hide what they do." She looked into the fire. Resin popped. Her face shifted with the licks of light. Coal hauls people in wagons at night. Not always sick folks. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they are quiet because someone taught them to be. There is a house by La Junta where the horses shy from the barn. I kept a man alive there who should have been let go. The man with the scalpels called himself Silas Crow. The one with the rings called himself Judge Sloan when he wanted people to listen. Eli listened without nodding. Names tasted like iron on the tongue. He set them in the same careful place in his mind where he kept the layout of field tents and the order of instruments on a tray. "My daughter works as a nurse," he said. "She wrote to me from Denver." Then the letter stopped. "Denver," Nora said softly, as if the word were a small stone in her mouth. "Sloan keeps a place there. Marble floors, glass walls so gentlemen can watch and not be touched." The cottonwoods rattled. A train howl rose, thin and far. Eli watched the steam drift out of his coffee and break in the air. "I do not need kindness," he said. "I need a way in." Nora's hands closed around the tin cup. Her wrists were angry red. The skin would scar where the rope had bitten it the way burned flesh does when it heals crooked. "You were not kind," she said. "You were exact." They sat with that between them. The fire ate down until it was a bowl of red stones. Moths flew into the smoke and tipped away. On the river, a frog sounded twice and fell silent. "I can take you as far as the door," Nora said, "the one they do not want seen. I can show you where the floor does not creak and where to stand so the lamp does not throw a shadow. That is all." "That is enough," Eli said. He drew a small cloth from his bag and a bottle with no label. He cleaned her wrists. She did not pull away when the carbolic stung. He saw her jaw work and let her have her anger. When he had bandaged the raw places with strips from his own shirt, he rolled his sleeves down to hide the loss. "You carry a gun," she said. "In the war I did not," he said. "Now I do." He reached into the wagon chest and brought out a small revolver wrapped in oiled rag. He set it on the blanket between them. The metal had the blue of a pond at dusk. "If you stay," he said, "this is yours." "If I go," she said, "it is mine anyway." "It is," he said. She picked it up. It fit her hand like something it had been waiting for. She checked the cylinder without looking proud of the fact that she knew how. A different woman might have touched her hair to see if it lay right after so long without a mirror. Nora found her reflection instead in the black shine of the barrel. For a breath, there was a stranger looking back at her. The fire popped. The stranger was gone. A gust came off the river and ran through the leaves. Ash lifted and spun. Eli coughed once when the smoke shifted, and he leaned out of it the way a man leans out of a memory. He poured the last of the coffee and let the pot sit. "You can sleep," he said. "I will sit first watch." "I have not slept without a lock in 3 years," Nora said. "Then sleep with a gun," Eli said. She wrapped up in a wool blanket that smelled of cedar and rain from long ago. Her eyes closed and opened and closed again. Her fingers stayed near the revolver. Eli sat with his back to the wagon wheel and watched the dark. A glass insulator on a telegraph pole caught the last light and held it like a tired eye. In the grass, a cricket started up in one rhythm, then chose another. From far out on the flat came a sound that was not the train. Hoofbeats. Slow, measured, then a pause as if the rider had turned to look for something he had left behind. Eli lifted his chin and let the wind bring him the direction. He did not move to wake her. He reached for the rifle and slid it across his knees, the metal cold at first, then warm where his hand held it. The hoofbeats came again closer now on hardpan, then the sound went soft on sand. A lantern bobbed once at the bend in the river and went dark. Eli listened to Nora breathe. He did not look away from the dark. At first light, the river was a sheet of pewter. Eli kicked dirt over the last of the coals and checked the ground by the bend. Hoof marks pressed the damp sand deep then shallow where the horse had stepped into silt. A smear of soot blackened a willow branch at shoulder height. He lifted it and sniffed. Old lamp oil. He looked upstream and down, then let the branch fall back. Nora watched him from the wagon tongue with the revolver tucked into her skirt pocket. Her wrists were stiff bandages browned at the edges where the river water had dried. The wind came off the plains and carried dust and the faint sweet of alfalfa. She pulled the scarf tight at her throat and climbed up when Eli clicked to the team. They kept the river on their right for a time, then cut southeast over land that rose and fell like a sleeping animal. Sun burned the dew away. Grasshoppers sprang and clattered against the wagon boards. The road narrowed to 2 ruts and then to a notion where wheels had once passed. Eli did not waste words. He saved breath for the long miles and for the habit of listening. He watched the horizon in quarters. Left front, left back, right back. He saw everything in grids and lines. Nora saw the small things, a loose strap, a curling edge of canvas, the way the right horse favored its left foreleg when the ground pitched. At noon, they stopped where an old cottonwood threw a small patch of shade. Eli watered the team and set the saddle blankets to dry. Nora rinsed the bandages at the canteen and bound her wrists again with clean cloth. Eli cut jerky into strips with a steady knife and handed her half without comment. "Tell me the barn," he said after a time. Nora took a breath and let it out. She did not look at him while she spoke. Slats close, no light from the east side. That is where they kept the ones who came late. There is a trough that smells of lye more than feed. I slept near the door once when the old man was sick and could not tell me to move. There is a floor plank by the sink that sings. Do not step there. Where is the office, he said? Past the kitchen. Left turn at the stove, then 2 doors. The second door stays locked unless a key with a long stem opens it. Cole keeps the key on a ring that clicks against his belt. He likes the sound. Who comes, he said. A man with an Eastern suit, a woman with a veil who never spoke to the hands, and a physician, Silas. He carries himself like a man who is never late. Eli nodded once. We go at dark. They sheltered the wagon in a draw and waited for the light to tip off the land. Crickets started. A nighthawk sliced the air and folded again. The ranch house rose out of the flat as a rectangle of dark against darker. One lamp burned in the kitchen, a square of butter light. From the back porch, a string of glass blew small bright notes into the wind. The sound was delicate and wrong in a place like this. Nora touched Eli's sleeve and pointed. The glass was not a decoration. Small sample vials, their corks drilled, hung by wire from a wood strip. Each turned and caught starlight as if it had its own small mind. Eli filed the sight away. He loosened the knife in his sheath and felt for the weight of the pistol at his hip. He did not draw it. He moved only when the wind moved, the way an old scout once taught him, and reached the kitchen door without drawing a shadow. Inside, the smell was salt fat and soap and something that clung to the nose like rust. Nora slipped past him and set her fingers on the jamb where the paint was worn to smooth wood. She stepped where she had stepped 100 nights when she carried trays. The board by the sink let out a long, thin note when Eli put his weight there, and he froze. Nora shook her head and shifted him one board over. The note died. The office door stood in a short hall, as she had said. The first door was a pantry with sacks and jars, and a calendar with July crossed in neat lines of pencil. The second door had a new lock, bright and proud against old paint. Eli took 2 wire picks from a small leather pouch and set them in the keyway. He made no sound. The tumblers thought about it. Then one clicked, then another, and the bolt slid. The room smelled cold. Not ice cold, but cellar cold, with a taste of stone. A desk sat under a window, with a green bottle for weight on a pile of papers. A ledger lay open. The ink was dry on the last entry. Eli stood where the moon allowed him to read. A9, the page said in a hand with careful loops. Transfer to East Annex, Denver. Fees remitted to Foundation per instruction. Under that, a line of names he did not know, and then one that turned his mouth dry. Not Claire. A number and an initial were all. C, then a dot, then M. He stared at the small mark until it blurred. Nora moved like someone who had dusted this room and had been watchful not to shift an item a finger's width. She opened the bottom drawer with 2 fingers and pulled a letter tied with string. The seal had the impression of a scale held by a blindfolded woman, Judge Whitaker, Sloan, Denver. Inside, a clean page set out an amount with commas and a note that said agricultural improvements. Money for a crop, Nora murmured, of people. Eli rifled the ledger fast and clean, then slid it into a canvas bag. He lifted the green bottle and found a key under it with a long stem. He pocketed that too. Nora had a hand on a small door behind the desk. Do not, he said. She did not. She was looking at the wood. It was newer than the rest of the wall. She took a breath like a swimmer and put her ear to it. For a moment the house spoke to itself in cracks and small sighs. Then from somewhere beyond the wall came a thin voice that might have been a pipe or an animal or a person learning to be quiet for a long time. Eli's hand tightened on the bag's strap. Boots creaked on the back steps. A man cleared his throat and spat. The spit hit dry dirt and made a sound like a seed on a drum. Nora turned, and Eli put 2 fingers on the candle wick in the desk tray to darken it before the match could make a flare. They slid under the desk together, not touching knees to ribs, breath slow. Light from a lantern rode along the floor and up the chair back like a band of gold. The office door swung and stopped when it met Eli's boot heel, then a hand reached in and nudged it wider. The lantern lifted. A man with hand hair on the back of his fingers placed the light on the desk and bent to look at the ledger that was no longer there. He touched the green bottle, then set his mouth in a line. Must have put it up, he said to himself. He lifted the lantern again. Its glass was fresh and threw a clean circle. It passed so close to Eli's cheek he could feel the warmth and smelled the ghost of smoke trapped in the glass. The man muttered and went out the way he had come. They breathed again. Eli stood and set the chair as it had been with a precise inch from the desk. He placed the bottle where the dust ring told him it had sat and closed the drawer with a small push that made no sound. Nora looked once more at the new wood panel and then away. They left by the kitchen and did not make the glass sing. The wagon took the road north. They climbed into higher land where the air thinned and the light changed color. Nora slept in snatches. Each time she woke, she checked the revolver like a habit, then watched Eli's hands on the lines and the way he shifted his back to ease an old hurt that flared in cold mornings. He saw her watching and said nothing. The miles wore them into the kind of quiet that is not empty. Denver rose from the plain with brick and stone and a fat new station where men in fine coats stepped down and women in travel dresses held parasols. The Sloan Institute sat on a rise like a church that had forgotten about prayer. Its front carried arches and a tall window like a single clear eye. Inside, the sconce flames burned steady and the smell of carbolic caught at the soft palate. Dr. Amos Reed met them in a narrow street 2 blocks away at a house with curtains drawn and a step that needed paint. He was lean with hair that had taken to gray at the temples. His hands were clean and his collar straight. He took Eli's hand hard, then looked at Nora. He did not flinch at the bandages. "I will not ask," he said. "Come inside." He had maps. He had coffee. He had a neighbor boy bring a basket, as if it were bread delivered, but inside was a folded dress in sober blue, with a white apron and a cap. He set it on the table and returned with a tin of pins and a pair of scissors. "You can pass a desk nurse without eyes on you for long," he said to Nora. His voice was low. "You have the way of a person who knows where to put her feet." She did not say thank you. She touched the cloth like a person checks the weave of a good blanket for winter. Eli watched from the chair by the window and said little. The ledger lay open on the table, weighed by a mug. Reed read the lines in silence, and the muscle by his jaw worked. "They do not write the whole names," Reed said. "They write enough for them," Eli said. Reed took a breath like a man with a choice he did not like. He reached into a drawer and laid down papers with a seal in a neat hand. Certificates, letters, a name printed clean, Hannah Smith. The letters would pass when held up to a lamp. Some truths do not need to be true to work. Nora put on the blue dress. The fabric had starch that rasped a little when she moved. Reed's wife had been roughly her size once if the set of the shoulders told the story. Reed adjusted the collar so it lay right and set the cap on her hair with 2 pins that crossed like a promise. They walked the 2 blocks together and split at the corner. Reed went up the steps to the Institute with the stride of a man who belonged anywhere he chose to stand. Nora kept 3 paces behind and to his right, and carried a small bag with a coin purse and a clean handkerchief and nothing that would rattle. The entrance nurse sat at a high desk with a pen and a look that had judged hundreds. Reed spoke, and the look softened. Names opened doors. He said the name of a ward matron who liked to be called Miss, even though she was married. He said the name of an attending who liked compliments in Latin. Nora watched the floor shine and kept her eyes at a respectful tilt. She saw the cage in the corner on a stand, the bars fine and curved. Inside, a small yellow bird clung to its perch and breathed in shallow sips. The air in that hall tasted of vinegar and gas. The bird's chest ticked fast. They waited while a clerk went to tell someone. Reed kept one hand on his hat instead of setting it down. He hated rooms like this, Nora could tell. He breathed shallow, too. A woman in a crisp black dress came. She smiled with only her mouth and not her eyes. "Dr. Reed," she said, "you bring us a jewel. We are in need." "This is Miss Hannah Smith," Reed said. "Experience in fevers and wounds, steady hands." The woman looked Nora over as if checking a shelf for dust. Nora let her. She stood at the angle nurses learn attentive yet small. "You will start tonight," the woman said. "Ward C, I will find you in the changing room at 8. Reed left her in a corridor with a bench and a glass of water. His face said many things at once. Pride, rage, old weariness. He touched the brim of his hat as if that might keep her safe and walked away without looking back. At 8, Nora stepped into Ward C with her cap set square. Mrs. Garrett round in the shoulders and brisk handed her a list and a ring of keys tied to a leather thong. People slept in rows. The lamps were turned low. The world was hushed and sharp at once. A cough astir, a small groan when a joint stuck. The smell of sweat and spirits and the sweet astringent of carbolic rode together. "Walk with me," Mrs. Garrett said. "We move fast and we do not make people afraid." Nora moved. She counted beds, learned faces, learned the rhythm of the room. She set a hand to a gentleman's forehead and felt the heat run up her palm like fire through paper. She marked a bottle of digitalis with a pencil line where it had been. She checked that the morphine was in order and locked. A young man almost bumped her at the door with a tray of syringes. He wore a white coat with a stain so small he had not noticed it. His name tag said Peter Yates. His eyes were too quick and went to the East Annex door without meaning to. "Sorry," he whispered. "Do you always carry more than you need?" Nora said. He looked down at his tray, then up, trapped and flustered. "They use them fast, in the annex. Dr. Crow likes the rooms set. He likes to see how things look." Mrs. Garrett called, and he went grateful to be sent. Near midnight, a bell rang clear and high, followed by a second bell with a lower tone. Mrs. Garrett set her jaw. "Lecture," she said. "Attendance is for all staff who are free to go. The doctor is presenting a new approach to pressure in the head." Nora followed the small stream of nurses and attendants to a round room with tiers like a theater. The light made the metal gleam. A man stood below in a white coat that did not belong to a ranch or a trail. His hair lay smooth. His hands were bare. He spoke in even tones that filled the space. Silas Crow had a voice meant for command. He moved with the ease of a man who knew every eye was on him. On the table, a man lay with straps at wrist and ankle. His head was shaved in a crescent skin yellow with iodine. The air was very clean there, which meant many things. Crow spoke of ventricles and pressure of the ache that builds behind the eyes, and how to cut it without killing the thing you wanted to keep. He did not say soul. He said function. He said capacity. He introduced a tube that was not like the usual one, and his hand did a small dance with the scalpel that was precise and without care for anything but the line. Judge Sloan sat in the front calm as a man who owns a view. His beard was neat and white. He watched like a person watches a play that he has already read. Nora watched the eyes of the nurses near her. Some were caught by the movement of the bright instruments. Some held their breath when the man on the table shivered and went still again. Nora tried not to look at the face on the table. She listened instead. Crow's words made a lattice. She set the new words against what she already knew and felt the shape of a thing that had nothing to do with easing headaches. When it was done and the subject wheeled away, staff rose and murmured. Crow wiped his hands with a towel and turned toward the exit. He came up the aisle a few steps to where Mrs. Garrett stood. His gaze slid over Nora like water over glass, then paused. Not long. Long enough to mark the cap and the collar and the hands at rest. He nodded once to Garrett. "You have taken on someone who pays attention," he said. "We are fortunate," Mrs. Garrett said. Crow looked at Nora. The corner of his mouth twitched, pleased by his own choice of words earlier in the hall for a different audience. He said nothing, yet Nora felt what he thought. He saw a tool. He did not see the woman he had sold by a pen of cattle. Back in Ward C, when the rounds were done and the bottles counted, Nora asked for the record books. Mrs. Garrett liked order and liked a nurse who liked order more. "Be quick," the matron said. "Do not leave gaps." Nora passed her finger along the spines and drew the transfer log. She sat at the little desk with the green glass lamp and turned pages. 12 moved in the last month, all to East Annex. The entries were neat and identical. The notes on discharge to family were too clean and too much like one another to be true. In the small cupboard where boxes of personal things should have been, she found 3 labeled with names that the log said had gone home, handkerchiefs with initials, a Bible with a date. Nobody had come to claim them. In the bottom of the desk drawer, tucked under a blotter, lay a folder thinner than the rest. Someone had written A9 on the tab with the careful letters of a physician. She opened it and found phrases that lifted hair on the arms. Increased neural activity with decreasing temperature. Subject maintains memory of recent events despite systemic failure. Judge S authorizes extension. The last page was an observation sheet with the boxes measured in quarter hours. The lines recorded numbers that ran high, then low, then high again. At the top, a clean hand had written, "Subject C. Mercer." The pen slipped in Nora's fingers and marked the margin. She heard her own breath too loud in the small room. In the corridor, a cartwheel squeaked once and went quiet. She set the folder back in order. She shut the drawer with care. Outside in the dim hall, someone cleared a throat and said her borrowed name. "Miss Smith, the annex asks for you." The nurse with the crisp cuffs waited in the dim hall. "Miss Smith, the annex asks for you." Nora rose. Her cap sat straight, the apron smooth, where Reed's careful hands had pinned it. She followed the nurse along a corridor where the lamps burned higher and the air thinned to that clipped chemical taste. A door of varnished oak stood ahead with a brass plate that read East Annex. The nurse produced a key with a long stem and turned it. The lock swallowed the metal with a clean click. White tile took the light and threw it back. The temperature dropped half a breath. The varnish smell gave way to phenol and something bright like cold iron. Nora felt the change in her teeth. The walls shone with a glaze that made everything look sharper than it had any right to be. Dr. Silas Crow waited by a glass case with instruments laid in rows. He wore a white coat. His hair was sure of itself. When he spoke, his voice filled the space and left no room for argument. "You will observe and record," he said. "You will not improvise. You will not enter a chamber without instruction." "Yes, doctor." He walked as she walked slow enough that she could see the shape of the place and commit it to the map in her head. They passed a room where something bubbled behind blue glass. A lab assistant checked a gauge eyes trained to show nothing. They passed a side door with a single red line painted at shoulder height. Beyond it, a hum lived in the walls, steady and low. Crow stopped at a ward that did not look like any ward Nora had ever worked. 6 small rooms of glass faced a central desk, like stalls in a stable for rare stock. Light fell through the panels and turned the air into a mirror. Each chamber held 1 bed. 3 beds were empty. 3 held bodies. "This is the current cohort," Crow said. He nodded toward a small brass bell at the desk. "If agitation rises, press. Do not be a hero." "What is the measure of success?" Nora asked. Crow turned, pleased. "Elevated neural activity concurrent with a drop in core temperature." He took a chart from a slot and tapped a line with a clean nail. "When the thinking persists as the vessel fails, you mark it." He set the chart down and looked at her at last, straight on. The look was not intimate. It was inventory. It slid off the surface and moved on. He gestured toward the glass and left. Nora stood at the desk and held very still until the sound of his steps was gone. Then she breathed again and moved toward the nearest occupied chamber. The glass made a faint tremor in its framing when she touched it with a knuckle. Inside, a middle-aged man slept with his mouth open around a rubber tube. His skin had the thin sheen of someone the body is abandoning a little at a time. Needle marks bloomed on the crook of his arm like new fruit. Chamber 3 held a girl who could not have seen 20 summers. Her collarbones lifted from her chest like wings trying to be wings. Fine hair stuck to her forehead. The monitor at her bedside clicked before it drew another line on a strip of paper. Chamber 5 was the one that pulled her like a tide. A woman lay with an oxygen mask tied too tight, the strap deep in the flesh by the ear. Auburn hair strayed from under a bandage and lay against the pillow like weed under clear water. The hands on the blanket were long and narrow with a strength in the joints even at rest. A small birthmark the color of tea lay at the wrist, a little spill God might have made when distracted. Nora did not move for a full count of 15. Her heart stumbled once, then found a hard-working pace. She glanced for the door, then back. Her fingertips left a ghost on the glass where breath had fogged and then cleared. She checked the foot of the bed. The clipboard hung by a small chain. The letters had the same tight hand as the file she had seen. A9 Protocol, Subject C, Mercer. She let her eyes ride the numbers, pulse high, temperature lower than it should be. Annotations in that firm hand. Consciousness persists during stimulation. Memory intact. She set the board back on its nail and stepped away so fast she hit the desk, and the bell shivered but did not ring. Her hands found each other and stilled. She looked at the clock over the door. The second hand did what second hands do. It took what it wanted. Peter Yates came in with a tray he held like it might bite him. He set it down with too much care and looked at the chart slots to avoid looking at Nora. "How long have you worked in here?" she said. He blinked. He tried to smile. 2 months. "You were at the lecture?" "Yes, miss." "You know who she is," Nora said so low he had to come closer to hear. She did not look at the chamber when she said it. His breath hitched. He looked and then tried not to. His voice went small. "She was a nurse. She came to ask questions, and then she was a subject. It happens fast when they decide. You can carry a message." He took a step back. The tray rattled. He caught it. His mouth worked before words came out. "They watch the door," he said. "They count supplies. Miss, I am not brave." Nora looked at him, and then at the white tile behind him, and then at him again. She kept her face quiet. "You do not have to be. You only have to be someone who needs gauze at the wrong time." He shook his head before he had heard the rest. Then he stopped and let his shoulders fall. "What would the paper say?" "Alive," Nora said. "See alive. Annex midnight." He swallowed. His eyes did a fast pass of the room as if someone might be in the air behind him. He picked up a stack of folded lint and made a small show of counting it. He whispered without moving his lips. "Who takes the paper?" "Man with a blue scarf," Nora said. She had not seen a blue scarf there, had been no time to arrange a tell that neat. Reed had said he knew ways through the city that were not on any plan. Still, a color in a hall works when a man means to be found. Peter nodded as if the simple fact of a color made the world manageable. He slid one folded lint square into the pocket of his coat where a folded note might hide. He lifted the tray. "They will ask why I go," he said. "Say you need more lint," Nora said. "Men who do not nurse never know how much is enough." He left with his head down and his steps careful. Nora watched the glass for a full minute and then forced herself to work. Pulse checks, temperature checks, notes in a neat hand that was not hers. She pressed the brass bell once when the girl in Chamber 3 began to flail against a dream. An orderly came and stood with folded arms until the dream passed. He did not step in. He watched the way someone watches a clock. Nora returned to Chamber 5 and bent close. The woman's eyes moved under lids. Behind the mask, a breath caught, then slid. Nora leaned down as if to check the straps. "Claire," she said. The name was a breath more than a word. "Claire, listen. It is Nora. Your father is near." The eyelids flickered. Nothing more. A line on the monitor rose, then found its old path. Nora stiffened when a shadow fell on the glass. She turned. Judge Whitaker Sloan stood in the doorway with two men in dark suits who wore their hair too long at the neck and their eyebrows like tired birds. Their hands were soft. Their eyes were not. Crow walked with them and spoke in the tone he used when he was schooling donors. Here he said, gesturing at the glass like a man at a window back east. "You can observe the end stage. The mind holds. The vessel declines. This is the place where we can intervene." One of the men murmured in a language that clicked a little. The other looked at Crow's hands and nodded. Sloan watched with that same patient gaze he had in the lecture hall. It had the set of a man who had once been a boy who took apart insects to see what made them move. "Proceed on schedule," Sloan said. "We do not delay." A guard appeared at the annex door. He stood near enough to the lock that his hand could have rested on it, and close enough to Nora that she could smell the tobacco on his coat. His eyes drifted over her and away. To him, she was a collar and a cap and a list of tasks. Peter came back 3 minutes later with a new stack of lint. His face was gray. Sweat gathered above his lip. He did not look at Nora, which told her more than a look would have. A thread clung to his sleeve. He pinched it off with quick fingers. The clock hands moved the way clock hands always do when a room needs them to stop. The hum from the side room deepened. A cart rolled by with leather straps looped over the handles and coiled wire stacked on a tray. Crow pulled a curtain aside to reveal a secondary lab where tall glass tubes rose from a table and caught the lamps like green water. "Prepare the subject," he said. An assistant unlocked Chamber 5. Cold air slid into the room as if water had found a crack and rushed in. Nora felt the draft on her wrists. The little hair there stirred. She took up a syringe from the tray and drew a dose of clear fluid. The plunger kissed the mark that a nurse reads by habit. She moved forward, as if this were any other night in any other ward with any other patient who needed steady hands. The guard shifted to make space for her. The glass door opened wider on its hinges. Claire's lashes trembled. A thin line of condensation bloomed on the inside of her mask with each shallow breath. The rubber strap had cut a fine red seam at her cheek. Nora set her fingers around the strap and lifted it just enough to slide the mask down for a count of 2 so that a mouth could taste unfiltered air and remember how it works. The assistant glanced toward Crow. Crow was showing the gentleman a dial and tapping the face of it, as if to say that a number could be trusted with what it was about to do. Nora leaned close until her lips were almost at Claire's ear. "Stay with me," she said. "When I say, breathe, breathe." She pressed the syringe to the vein and felt the skin give under the needle. The needle went home. The plunger moved. Behind her, the bell at the desk rang once, a single note high and thin. Then the second bell answered with a lower tone. Somewhere outside the annex, a door slammed. A breath of warm air hunted down the corridor and touched the back of Nora's neck. It carried a pinch of smoke, not much, enough to sting the nose. Crow lifted his head. Sloan turned. The guard took one step toward the hall. Now, Crow said, voice level, the command the same as ever. "Bring her." Smoke crept under the annex door in a gray seam. The guard glanced toward the hall. The first bell rang again, sharp and fast, like a struck glass. Then a new sound came through the walls, a softer fall and rise that carried the panic of bodies in a stairwell. "Contain it," Judge Sloan said. His voice was calm, the kind of calm people obeyed. "We do not halt." Crow nodded. "Proceed." They loosened the straps at Claire's ankles. Her skin had that cold that comes from the inside. The mask fogged and cleared, fogged and cleared. Nora felt the pull of the choice before she made it. She set her palm over the mask and pushed it aside for 3 counts. "Breathe," she said. Claire's chest lifted shallow and quick. Her eyelids fluttered, then steadied. The guard shifted to block the door. Heat moved through the corridor like a hand. Peter stood by the cabinet with a roll of bandage in his fist. His throat worked as he swallowed. Nora picked up the chart and spoke like an ordinary nurse. Subject 5 is agitated. Dr. Crow requested sedation before transport. She reached for a brown bottle with a handwritten label and set it aside with a little tap that said she knew what it was and would not use it. The syringe in her other hand held the clear stimulant she had drawn a minute before. The needle slid. The plunger sank. Under Nora's fingers, Claire's pulse stuttered, then found a firmer beat. The annex door banged open. The guard spun hand to his sidearm. Eli stepped through the smoke face, blacked with soot hair singed at the ends. He had the rifle held at his waist, and the barrel did not wobble. His pale eyes took the room in one sweep and settled on Claire. The set of his jaw changed. He did not say her name. He did not say anything. Behind him came Dr. Amos Reed with a satchel and 2 men with badges. The taller of the 2 had a face that said he had been hungry once and had not forgotten. He held up the badge just enough to catch the light. U.S. Marshal, he said. Calder Boone, Whitaker Sloan Silas Crow, you will submit to arrest. The guard pulled his pistol halfway, then saw the muzzle of Eli's rifle and thought better. He lifted his hands. The smoke bent around him and made his eyes water. Sloan turned a fraction slow and careful, like a man avoiding a bee. He looked at Boone, then at Reed, then at Eli. He set his chin. You have no authority in this building. Boone took 3 steps forward and did not blink. I have sworn testimony. I have transfer records. I have a clerk who does not lie well. Put your hands where I can see them. Crow lifted one palm, then the other. His eyes had a bright glitter, like a man who is calculating a door that has not yet appeared. He kept himself between the Europeans and the deputies, without making it obvious. One of the visitors reached for his coat. Boone's deputy saw the movement and fixed on it. The visitor smiled without his eyes and stilled his hand. Eli moved to the gurney. He set the rifle on the mattress at Claire's thigh and put his hands on her face so lightly the skin did not shift. He had not touched her since she was a girl with a fever who cried in her sleep from pain in her long bones. He checked her pupils with 2 gentle thumbs. He looked up at Reed. Reed was already at the other side, opening his bag, breath held against the smoke. She is loaded with whatever they have been pushing, he said. We can keep her heart honest if we are careful. Crow smiled at that word. Careful, he said. Dr. Reed, if you remove her from this environment at this stage, you will kill her. Eli looked at him without expression. You already did that in every way that counts. Sloan moved his gaze to Nora. He did not know her, and that irritated him. His face made a small movement that knew how to punish a clerk for a misfiled paper. Who is this nurse, he said. Nora did not answer. She was already unhooking the lines that ran to the monitor and the little glass tubes. Her fingers were steady. She clipped a length of oxygen tubing, looped it, held it ready. She did not take her eyes off the work. Claire's lashes trembled again. The stimulant had reached what it meant to reach. Boone nodded to his men. Cuff them, he said. The visitor in the gray suit moved fast for his age. The pistol appeared as if it had been in his hand all along. The muzzle flashed and the sound punched the air hard. Boone's deputy staggered and clapped a hand to his upper arm. Blood soaked his sleeve that quick. Eli snapped the rifle up. Boone dropped low and hit the visitor at the knees like a farm boy who had learned to tackle a steer. The pistol skittered across tile and hit the baseboard with a hollow knock. The second visitor raised his hands high with his fingers spread like a man who knows how fast a trigger can move. Crow took his chance. He pivoted quick and clean toward the side door with the red line. Nora's body moved before her mind did. She pulled the revolver from under her apron and drew a bead on the doorframe, not the man. She aimed low. The shot cracked and went flat against the tile and came back in your bones. Crow stumbled as the round took him in the shoulder. He hit the jam with the side of his head and went down on one knee. His hand smacked the glass and left a clean, bloody handprint that held for a moment and then smeared as he slid. Nora kept the pistol on him. Her hands did not shake. Her mouth was a thin line. She remembered not the sale in Pueblo, but the night a hand cut a strap and let her breathe through her own mouth again for the first time in months. The memory was not merciful. It was exact. Stay down, she said. Crow sat with his back to the wall and panted. His eyes said he could not abide that word. Boone cuffed Sloan. The judge held out his hands as if he were presenting them for a ring. When the steel closed, he gave a short laugh with no mirth in it. You think this ends something, he said to Boone. Boone did not answer. He lifted Sloan's wrists a little higher than comfort allowed and handed him to a deputy whose jaw was set. He nodded at Nora without looking away from their prisoners. Respect moved like a small current through the room and was gone. Reed had Claire's wrist between his fingers and his ear near her mouth. "We move," he said. "There is a service yard," Peter said. He had come forward without meaning to. "A lift. It goes down to the boiler corridor. The west stair is crowded." "Show me," Eli said. They rolled the gurney. The wheels squealed in protest because the annex kept its tile too clean and the rubber did not like it. Nora held the oxygen line near Claire's mouth and counted quietly for her. In, out, in, out. They hit the corridor. The heat was fuller there, a living thing looking for something to feed. The wall lamps had halos. A red glow pulsed down the hallway like a heartbeat in light. An orderly scrambled past them with a bundle of linens and did not even see their faces. A canary in a small brass cage hung from a hook at the corner where the hall turned. It had its beak open and its eyes half closed. Its body weighed as much as a match in a hand. It breathed hard and then stopped and then started again in a panic of tiny movement. Nora reached up without thinking and unlatched the small door. The bird did not move. There was nowhere for it to go. Peter ran ahead. He reached a square opening with an iron gate and yanked at the handle. The freight lift sat one floor below with its slatted door down. The bell rope hung like a loose tail. Heat pressed up through the shaft. The air tasted like pennies. "Can we call it?" Nora said. Peter hauled the rope. The bell clanged. Nothing moved. Reed set his bag on the floor and stepped to the edge and looked down without leaning. Flames licked along a line of grease on a lower sill. If the lift stuck, it would be for a reason that had nothing to do with engineering. "Stairs," Eli said. "They are crowded," Peter said. The gurney would not fit the stair corners. They needed the lift. Eli looked at the door track and the latch that held the slatted gate shut. He reached into his vest and took out the silver dollar. It lay in his palm without shine, only weight. He slid the coin into the gap by the latch and turned it in the narrow space. The metal caught on the curve and held. He pressed his shoulder to the gate and felt it give a finger's breadth. "Again," he said. Peter pushed. Nora set her hip against the slats. Reed braced the gurney so it did not roll backward. The gate groaned and then jumped and shot up a foot. "Hold it," Eli said. Nora shoved the coin deeper with the tips of her fingers. It wedged like it had meant to live there. The gate stuck open on the coin's edge. They slid the gurney onto the platform. The wheels screamed. Nora counted breath in Claire's ear, and Claire's chest obeyed. Peter leaned through the frame and grabbed the counterweight chain. He pulled. The whole cage shuddered and came up a fraction. Smoke lifted and swayed in the shaft. Reed set his shoulder to the wall and put his hands on the edge and pulled like a man hauling a stubborn mule up a bank. The lift rose, 6 inches, a foot. The pulleys complained in a language of old iron. Boone came into the corridor with 2 more deputies and the judge between them. Sloane walked as if the floor had been laid for him. He took in the scene with one bright sweep and then leaned toward Crow, who had been dragged into the hall and propped against the wall where he could not get to his feet without help. "The files," Sloane said. Crow's mouth twisted from the pain and from the taste of failure. He spoke low. "La Junta," he said. "The barn." Boone heard it. His face did not change. He passed the judge along to a deputy and planted himself at the corner where the hallway widened. He looked toward the annex and then toward the lift and made the choice that was standing at his feet. The lift reached level with the corridor floor. Eli pulled the gurney inside and set the brake with a hard snap. The coin held. Reed and Nora stepped in. Peter hesitated on the threshold and then stepped back into the hall. "I will misplace a key," he said to Boone, with a voice that was almost steady. "I will go home by a different street." Boone nodded once. It was not permission. It was a mark of the truth that stood there. Eli looked at Nora. "Stay with her," he said. Nora set one hand on the bar and the other on Claire's shoulder. She did not look at Eli when she answered. "I am." Eli pulled the rope. The lift began to descend. Heat climbed around them like a living skin. The light narrowed to a rectangle of gold at the top of the shaft and then was gone. The cage creaked and settled at the bottom with a jolt that rang in your teeth. The boiler corridor was a long stone throat with pipes that knocked now and then like someone behind a wall. Smoke gathered there and rolled in slow loops. An iron door stood open to a square yard, where the night looked like clean water. They pushed the gurney. The wheels jumped at a crack and then ran. The yard air hit their faces, and it tasted like dust and old rain. Reed tilted Claire's head and watched her chest and counted again. Nora steadied the mask. Eli looked up and saw the moon thin and sharp, and felt the wind that came down off the hills and moved the hair by his ear. A cry went up behind them. Boots hammered. A shot struck the bricks near the iron door and threw shards like hail. Eli raised the rifle and fired once, and that was enough. The street beyond the yard had a wagon with a canvas top, and a man with a little beard at the reins who lifted his chin when he saw Eli. Reed swung the gurney tail first into the wagon. Eli climbed in and hauled from inside, while Nora pushed and lifted with her legs under her, not her back. Claire's body shivered. Her hands fanned once brief and odd, then went still. Reed got a hand under her neck and eased it back with care. Boone reached the yard with 2 men. He looked at the wagon bed and then at Eli. He nodded. "Go," he said. Eli set a hand on Nora's forearm for 1 small second. He did not squeeze. He let the touch say what he did not have words for. She met his eyes. Smoke striped the air between them. A last gust came down the corridor behind Boone and pushed the smoke out into the yard. Through it, on the far side of the threshold, the brass of the canary cage caught a lick of light and winked. The tiny body on the perch gave one more small shiver and went quiet. The safe house on the hill held the night like a held breath. Curtains shut out the street. A lamp burned low on a sideboard. The room smelled of spirits and boiled linen. A clock ticked each second even without hurry or pity. Claire lay on a narrow bed with a folded blanket under her shoulders to ease the pull in her chest. Reed sat beside her with his sleeves rolled and his fingers on the pulse at her wrist. A length of tubing fed a trickle of air from a hand bellows. Nora worked the bulb slow and steady, counting under her breath. In, out, in, out. Claire's eyelids fluttered, then stilled. Color crept back into her mouth, 1 grain at a time. Eli stood at the head of the bed and watched every small change. He seemed made of angles and hush. When Reed reached for a vial, Eli held the tray without being asked. When the bellows slipped, his hand was there. He did not touch Claire's hair until Reed nodded. Then he smoothed a strand from her cheek. Boone came to the doorway with smoke still in his coat and a smear of soot along his jaw. He kept his hat in his hands. His voice carried only as far as it needed. "My men have them," he said. "The judge is quiet. The doctor is not." Reed did not look up. "He will be quieter soon." Boone set a folded paper on the table without pressing for attention. "I will need statements when she can spare a word." His eyes went to Nora, then back to Eli. "Not tonight." He left as he came. The floorboard in the hall creaked once. After that, the house returned to its own small sounds. The lamp buzzed. Water in the kettle sighed. Peter Yates slipped in near midnight with a coat too light for the hour and a satchel held tight to his side. He put it on the table and backed a step. "I found these by the annex door," he said. "They must have been set for the courier who did not come." Inside the satchel lay ledgers and notes and 3 envelopes sealed with wax. Reed closed the bag without exploring. He looked at Peter. The young man's eyes were red at the corners. He smelled of carbolic and smoke. "You have a place to sleep," Reed said. Peter shook his head. "I need to keep walking." He looked at Claire once. His mouth flattened as if a word had been stopped there. He turned and left the way he had come. Toward dawn, the air cooled. The lamp guttered and straightened. Nora set the bellows aside and held the tubing in one hand while she leaned close and spoke into Claire's ear. The words were simple, a nurse's words, the kind that let a body know which way to go. "Breathe with me," she said. "Now, again." Claire's throat moved. Her chest lifted and fell on its own. The line of her brow loosened. Reed eased the tubing away and watched the small hollow at the base of her throat. It filled. It released. He nodded once. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand and stood. Nora crossed to the window and raised it an inch. Cool air slid in and lifted the curtains. The smell of wet soil came with it, and the faint resin of pine that the wind had carried down from higher ground. She set a brass cage on the sill. Its door hung open. Inside the small perch was empty. The light caught the bars and made a line of gold on the wall. Eli reached into his vest and took out the silver dollar. It had lived in his pocket so long the edge had softened. He held it on his palm for a moment as if feeling its heat, then set it on the bedside table where Claire could see it when she woke. Nora watched his hand. "You carried it too long," she said. "It did the work," he said. She looked at Claire, then at the coin, then back to Eli. He understood the look. It said what needed saying. It asked what needed asking. He took a breath and let it go. "I kept a place in San Miguel County," he said. "It has gone to seed." Nora stood with her hands on the window frame. The night air moved across her wrists and cooled the places where the rope had burned. She did not look at him when she answered. "I know what to do with seed." He smiled with the small part of his mouth that remembered how. Reed returned with a basin and a towel. He washed his hands and set the towel aside. He He did not intrude on the talk. Claire's eyes opened to a thin slit. The pupils centered, then steadied. She found the ceiling, then the lamp, then the face at the head of the bed. Her lips shaped a word that did not need sound. Eli leaned close. "I am here," he said. Her gaze shifted. It found Nora. Recognition traveled across her face like light moving over a field at noon. She tried to speak. Nora bent until Claire could see her without straining. "You are safe," Nora said. Claire's hand moved under the blanket. It found the edge and pushed until her fingers were free. Eli guided them to the table. Her touch found the coin. She closed her hand around it and held on. Her chest rose, then fell, and the breath did not break. Outside, a wagon rumbled on the street. A milkman called softly to his team. In the yard below, someone hung a line for washing, even though the sun was not yet up. The world edged toward day, the way it always did, with small chores and quiet decisions. Nora pulled a chair to the bed and sat where she could see the rise of Claire's chest without leaning. Eli moved to the foot of the bed and rested his hand on the wood as if to steady them all. The curtains lifted in a long, slow breath and fell again. The room held simple and true. Claire slept without the mask. The coin cooled under her fingers. The open cage caught the light. The air from the window tasted clean. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.